Welcome to our fabric garden. So in this video, I'm going to explain to you how to get a fabric garden and what the steps are. So the first step of a fabric garden is to get the fabric, right? There are different kinds of fabric that you can choose to get, fabric with holes in it or fabric without holes. Ethan and I chose to buy fabric without holes and just burn our own holes in there. And then we could use kind of like the same fabric for the perimeter. So the first step when establishing your reduced weed garden is making the perimeter very far away from your fence. You don't want the breedberry to end at your fence. You want it to be further than your fence. So the weeds, or typically grass, cannot send shooters up into your garden. Shooters are where these plants over here that have sunlight and all the nutrition are sending little roots over underneath the fabric and trying to establish other plants, other grasses there. However, they cannot do that because there is a nice barrier even before we get into the garden. So you can mow right up to the barrier, and that's what Ethan and I do because the blade won't hit the barrier. It's low enough. So it's a great way to keep all those seeds away from your garden. Now, after you have the perimeter of your garden laid in fabric, or around your garden, back up a little bit. So when you're laying fabric, typically we do 2 feet out of the garden and a foot in the garden, or more. Or more out of the garden. So we want it to be a nice long strip. In this garden, we have about 3 feet. In our last garden that we just did, we had 2 feet outside of the garden. But you want a good chunk of it outside of the garden. And then also we did another row inside for our walking rows, as well as chives, because our kids love chives, so they can eat them as soon as they get in the garden. Now, after you have your perimeter established, you're going to start focusing on the fabric with holes in it. So you can either choose to buy it with holes or not, but then you're going to first burn your holes if you are burning your holes, and then lay it down. So laying it down on top of the outside fabric here, and then putting staples in as you go. So you'd staple the first whole side over there down, and then unroll your next layer of fabric and overlap this side. So as you can see, this piece of fabric is under our next fabric right here, and we fold the edges under, and the fabric that has lines on it is fabulous because you know that you're keeping it centered because you just fold on the line. So as you can see, we fold on the line and put a staple in. This staple is holding both the first piece of fabric and the second piece of fabric. And then there's staples all the way as you continue down, right there, and all the way as you continue down the rows. So we kept this rhythm of stapling the top down, leaving the bottom loose. And then once we got the next strip laid out, then we'd pull the previous strip tight, as well as put a staple in onto the overlapping fabric. This way it's overlapping and everything is nice and tight. And when the wind blows, you're not typically going to have much of it catching underneath the fabric. As you can see, it's pretty tight. There's some dirt underneath there. So the benefits of a garden like this there's many benefits. It keeps the moisture in. Also, like when rain falls, rain can fall and go through the fabric, so your plants are still getting plenty of moisture, as well as the ground. There's worms everywhere underneath this fabric, everywhere. Like I was weeding today, and with every weed clump I was pulling out, there were worms. So the nice thing about this fabric is that you do not have to weed very much, as you can see here. The only spot that I'm weeding this spring, because Ethan and I are actually living in a different state, so this is our garden away from home that we don't get to. But what we're weeding is just in this little circle here. So that's how to set up your fabric garden. Just start at the beginning and lay layer upon layer upon layer. You're just layering the edges, and so you should always have the top of this, always have the start of one over top of the second layer. And then you can also, once you have all of your rows established, depending on what you choose for composting and treating your soil, you could put your walkways over top of that. That's what Ethan and I did. We put our walkways, what we're walking on, actually over top of this edge, so then there's not a bunch of edges, because we have many different pieces of fabric coming this way, but we're like this aisle is holding all those different fabric pieces down, so there's not as many seams to trip on or to blow in the wind.